The road to the cottage had been narrowing for miles, the way old roads do when they are tired of carrying anyone anywhere important, until at last it gave up being a road altogether and became little more than a suggestion pressed into the grass. Mira noticed the exact moment it happened, the crunch of gravel softening into the hush of sand, and something in her chest loosened, the way a hand loosens when it finally sets down something heavy it has been carrying without knowing it. She had been told about the cottage by her grandmother years ago. In the unhurried way her grandmother told most things, as though truth were a kind of tea that needed time to steep. "There's a house by the sea," she had said, "that only opens its door to those who have stopped rushing." Mira had laughed then, the easy laugh of someone who did not yet understand what it meant to rush through an entire life without noticing. She understood it now. She had driven the last 3 hours in a kind of fog, her shoulders climbing slowly toward her ears with every mile until the moment the road became sand, and the fog, quite simply, lifted. The cottage stood where the land gave up its edges to the water, a low stone building with a roof the color of wet slate and windows glowing amber against the deepening blue of evening. Smoke rose from its chimney in a thin, unhurried ribbon, bending gently with the sea wind before dissolving into the darkening sky. Ivy had found its way up one wall in lazy loops, and someone, long ago it seemed, had planted lavender along the path, so that the moment Mira stepped from her car, the air itself seemed to exhale in soft purple fragrance. She stood for a while, simply looking at it. The cottage did not look built so much as grown, as if the stones had assembled themselves slowly over some great length of time, patient as coral, patient as driftwood finding its shape. Beyond it, past a low garden wall softened by moss, the ocean moved in the dark with a sound like breathing. A long inhale as the water drew back over the sand. A long exhale as it returned. Mira found herself breathing along with it, without deciding to. There was no innkeeper waiting, no light flicked on in greeting, no sign at all that she was expected, and yet the door was unlocked, and on the low table just inside sat a single brass lantern already lit, its flame swaying gently, as though it had only just noticed her arrival and was leaning forward for a better look. The first thing she noticed was the warmth, Not the aggressive warmth of a furnace, but something older and slower. The kind of warmth that had been building all day in stone walls and would not think of leaving before morning. The second thing she noticed was the smell. Wood smoke. And beneath it, something like dried herbs. And beneath that, very faintly, the sea, as though the ocean had been let indoors, just enough to remind her it was near. The main room unfolded before her, the way a good story unfolds. Not all at once, but in pieces that asked to be noticed one at a time. A stone fireplace took up most of one wall. Its fire burned down to a low, contented glow. Orange coals breathing softly beneath a single unburned log that had not yet decided whether to catch. 2 armchairs sat before it, deep and well-worn, upholstered in a green so faded it had become the color of moss on old roof tiles, and between them a small round table waited, empty, as if it knew someone would soon need somewhere to set down a cup of tea. Bookshelves lined the far wall from floor to ceiling, crowded in the comfortable, undisciplined way of shelves that have been filled by many different hands over many different years. Some books stood upright and orderly. Others leaned against their neighbors, as though they had grown tired mid-sentence and simply stopped there. A ladder on brass wheels waited at one end of the shelves, and Mira had the distinct impression, though she could not have said why, that the ladder had been used recently. Beneath the room's single deep-silled window sat a wooden window seat. Piled with cushions in faded blues and creams, positioned so that whoever sat there would look directly out over the darkening water. Mira crossed to it without quite deciding to, drawn the way a compass needle is drawn, and found that the cushion still held a little warmth. Outside, the first gentle patter of rain began against the glass. Not a storm. Nothing so dramatic as that, but a soft and companionable rain, the kind that seems to fall simply because the sky enjoys the sound it makes. Mira watched the drops gather and slide down the old glass, each one catching a small orange flicker from the fire behind her. And she felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, entirely unhurried. She left her bag by the door. It could wait. Everything could wait. And wandered further into the cottage. The floorboards giving soft, companionable creaks beneath her feet. A narrow hallway led from the main room. Its walls hung with small paintings of the coast. A lighthouse under a yellow moon. A rowboat pulled up onto pale sand. A heron standing very still in shallow water. None of the paintings were signed. All of them somehow felt like they had been painted by someone who loved this particular stretch of coast, the way one loves an old friend. The hallway opened into a small kitchen, and here Mira laughed softly to herself, because on the stove sat a copper kettle, and beside it, on a wooden board, a fresh loaf of bread cooled beneath a linen cloth, still faintly warm when she rested her fingertips against it. A jar of honey stood nearby, along with a small dish of butter and a chipped blue teapot that looked as though it had poured 10,000 cups of tea for 10,000 tired travelers before her. There was no note, no explanation. The cottage simply seemed to know, the way a good host knows, exactly what a person needs before they have thought to ask for it. She filled the kettle from a hand pump at the sink. Cold water, faintly mineral, tasting the way she imagined rain might taste if rain could remember being underground, and set it on the stove, where a fire already glowed low and orange beneath the iron plate. While the water began its long, unhurried climb toward singing, Mira explored the rest of the small kitchen. A shelf of jars holding dried lavender, chamomile, mint, and other herbs she didn't recognize by name, but whose scents she recognized immediately as garden, as green, as summer afternoons long past. Beyond the kitchen, a narrow staircase curled upward, worn smooth in the center of each step by years of feet she would never know. Mira climbed it slowly, one hand trailing along the cool stone wall, and found at the top a single bedroom beneath sloped wooden beams. A four-poster bed heaped with quilts in shades of cream and dusty rose. And she smiled at this. Another window seat, smaller than the one below, tucked into the eave. A small writing desk stood beneath the window, and on it lay a single leather journal, its cover soft and worn. A ribbon marking a page, perhaps a third of the way through. Mira did not open it yet. Some things she felt were meant to be saved for later. The way the last bite of something delicious is saved, turned over slowly in the mind before it is finally allowed. She returned downstairs as the kettle began softly to sing. Making tea in an unfamiliar kitchen is its own small ceremony, and Mira performed it slowly, without hurry, the way she suspected the cottage wanted things done. She warmed the blue teapot with a little hot water, swirled it, emptied it. She measured out dried chamomile and a curl of lavender from the jars on the shelf, added a spoon of honey to her waiting cup, and poured the water in a long, unhurried stream, watching steam rise and curl toward the low beams of the ceiling. The scent that lifted from the cup was something like a summer garden remembered in winter. Sweet, soft, faintly green. She carried the cup and a small plate of bread and butter to the armchair nearest the fire. And there, at last, she allowed herself to fully arrive. The chair received her, the way a chair receives someone it has been expecting. Cushions settling around her shoulders, the fire's warmth reaching her knees, her stockinged feet finding the worn wool rug beneath. Outside, the rain continued its soft percussion against the windows, and beneath it, fainter, came the endless breathing of the sea. Mira sipped her tea. It tasted of honey and quiet. For a long while, she did nothing at all but watch the fire. The way the log finally caught. A slow lick of flame climbing its side. The way the coals beneath shifted and glowed brighter, then softer, in a rhythm all their own. Unhurried, patient, entirely without urgency. She thought distantly of the life she had left behind for these few days. The emails, the meetings, the endless small decisions that had worn grooves into her like water into stone. And found, to her surprise, that from here in this chair, beside this fire, none of it could quite reach her. It existed somewhere else, in some other version of time, while she existed here. in this slow and golden now. The wind chimes hanging just outside the door stirred faintly in the wind. A handful of soft notes drifting in through some cracks she couldn't locate. And somewhere beneath the floor, or perhaps beneath the house entirely, she thought she could feel the sea's pulse, patient and enormous, holding the whole cottage gently in its rhythm, the way a mother holds a sleeping child without waking it. She did not know how long she sat like that. Time in the cottage seemed to have softened its edges, the way everything else here had softened. The light, the rain, the low murmur of the fire. When she finally rose to refill her cup, the window had gone fully dark, and where the clouds had briefly parted, she could see a scatter of stars low over the water, faint and cold and very far away, like the first thoughts of a night that had not yet decided to fully arrive. She stood at the window a long while with her second cup of tea, watching those few stars, watching the black shape of the water moving beneath them, and felt, without quite being able to explain why, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The rain did not stop so much as it changed its mind slowly, thinning from a steady patter into something softer, a mist that hung in the lantern light outside the window like breath on cold glass. Mira set her empty cup on the small table between the armchairs and found herself drawn again toward the window seat, where the cushions had grown warm from the fire and the glass had grown cool from the night. And she settled into the place where those two temperatures met. A blanket she hadn't noticed before pulled from somewhere and draped now across her knees. From here, the ocean was a suggestion more than a sight. A deeper darkness beyond the pale line of the shore, its presence known mostly through sound. She listened to it the way one listens to an old friend telling a long story. Not for the plot, not for any point it might be making, but simply for the comfort of the familiar voice. Wave after wave rolled in, gathered itself, broke softly against the sand, drew back with a hiss like a long-held breath finally released. Somewhere far off, so faint she might have imagined it, came the low, mournful call of a whale, a sound that seemed to rise from the very bottom of the sea and travel up through the water, through the sand, through the stones of the cottage itself, until it reached her as something felt more than heard. She thought about the loaf of bread cooling in the kitchen, the journal waiting upstairs, the ladder that had seemed recently used, and wondered, without any real alarm, who else might call this cottage home. Not in a way that frightened her, but in the way one wonders about a house that clearly has stories it hasn't yet told. The cottage did not feel empty. It felt rather like a place that was simply between visitors. The way a stage is never truly empty between scenes. Only quiet. Only waiting. A soft sound came from behind her. Not alarming, more like the settling of old wood. And when she turned, she saw that the fire had shifted, sending a small shower of orange sparks up the chimney, and that the log had finally caught fully, burning now with a low, steady flame. She watched those shadows for a while, the way a person watches clouds, finding shapes in them without trying. A bird here, a wave there, the long, slow curve of something that might have been a ship's hull, might have been nothing at all. Eventually she rose, drawn by curiosity as gentle and persistent as the tide itself, and returned to the bookshelf that lined the far wall. She ran a finger along them, feeling the different textures beneath her fingertip. Cracked leather, soft cloth, the cool slickness of a newer dust jacket, until her hand stopped on its own, resting against a slim, unmarked volume tucked between two much larger books, as though it had been hidden there, or perhaps simply protected. She drew it out. It was a journal. Its cover the deep brown of old tea, its pages soft and slightly rippled, the way paper becomes after years near the sea air. There was no name on the cover, no date, only a small pressed flower, a sprig of sea lavender, its purple long faded to the color of dusk. Tucked just inside the front page, like a bookmark left by someone who had meant, one day, to return to it. She carried it back to the armchair, tucked her feet beneath her, and opened it by the low gold light of the fire. The handwriting was careful and slightly slanted. The ink faded to a soft brown black. And the first entry, when she found it, was not dated in any way she recognized, only marked with a single word: arrival. The cottage found me tonight, it began, though I suspect it is more accurate to say I finally stopped moving long enough to let it. Mira smiled at that, feeling a small and pleasant shiver of recognition, as though she were reading a letter written to her specifically across some unknown span of years. She read on slowly, the way the cottage seemed to want everything read, and learned that whoever had written these words, a fisherman's daughter it seemed, had come to this same coast long ago, in a summer of grief she described only obliquely. The journal did not dwell on that grief. Instead, entry by entry, it turned toward the small, bright details of the days that followed. The taste of the first tomato from the garden, the particular blue of the sky after a storm, the discovery of a sea turtle's nest above the tide line, watched over for weeks until, one warm night in late summer, dozens of small shapes made their slow, determined way down to the water beneath a full moon. Further in, their entries grew stranger, though never frightening. Mentions of lights moving low over the water on certain nights, of shells that seemed to glow faintly blue when the moon was full, of a heron who returned to the same stretch of shallows every evening at the same hour and seemed, the writer swore, to incline its head in something like greeting. The old fishermen here have stories. One entry read, about the coast keeping its own kind of time and its own kind of company. I did not believe them until the night I saw the lighthouse light, where no lighthouse has stood in 40 years. Mira paused at that, her tea gone cool beside her, the fire settling lower, and found she did not feel the small chill of unease she might have expected. Instead, she felt something closer to wonder. The particular weightless wonder of childhood, before the world had taught her that most things must be explained to be believed. she read a few more entries. A description of tide pools glimpsed at first light. A recipe for a bread very much like the one now cooling in the kitchen, with a note in the margin that read simply, "The sea likes it with plenty of butter." And then, gently, closed the journal and set it on the table beside her. The pressed lavender sprig still marking its place. Feeling as though she had been allowed to sit for a while inside someone else's piece, and had been made, briefly, more peaceful for it. The rain had stopped entirely now. Through the window, she could see that the clouds had begun to part, torn slowly apart by a wind she couldn't feel indoors, revealing behind them a scatter of stars that seemed, in the cottage's particular stillness, unusually bright, unusually close, as though the sky itself had leaned down to get a better look. Mira rose, stretched, and felt the particular looseness that comes only after a long day has finally truly ended. Not the exhaustion of collapse, but the soft unwinding of a body that has remembered, after a long forgetting, how to simply rest. She banked the fire low, the way one tucks in a small sleeping animal, and made her way to the door. She opened the door and stepped out into the cool, clean night. The storm's last breath brushing her face, and found herself looking down a long, pale stretch of sand toward a sea gone silver and slow beneath the clearing sky. Before she had risen from the armchair, Mira had turned back once to the shelf of books, and there she had found, wedged between two much heavier volumes, a slim collection bound in faded green cloth, its title stamped in letters worn nearly to invisibility, Tales and Tellings of the Northern Shore. The book was not old in the way of ancient things, but old in the gentler way of things simply well used. Its pages soft at the corners from many hands, turning them slowly by many other firesides. There was a story about the little glimmering fish, which the book called, in the old local tongue, something that translated roughly to lantern children. Small creatures said to gather in the shallows only on nights when someone nearby had, that day, set down some burden they had carried too long. The book offered no explanation for how the fish might know such a thing, only noted in the plain and practical voice of someone recording what generations of fisherfolk had simply observed to be true, that the lights appeared reliably enough. There was a story, too, about the glowing shells, gentler and simpler than the story of the fish. The book called them the tide's small kindnesses, and explained that they were said to appear only for those the sea had decided needed a path lit, rather than left to find in the dark. The chapter on the lighthouse was the longest in the small book, and the one Mira found herself returning to twice, tracing the sentences slowly, with one finger the way one traces a well-loved photograph. The lighthouse, the book explained, had stood at the headland for longer than any written record of the coast could confirm, though it had not, by any account, held a working lamp in some 4 decades. And yet, travelers along this particular stretch of shore had continued across all the years since to report a light burning in its lantern room on certain nights. Never announced, never predictable, but always, it seemed, arriving for exactly the traveler who most needed a fixed point to walk toward in an otherwise unfamiliar dark. No one has ever found who tends it, the book said. Some say the coast tends itself, the way a garden left long enough to its own devices learns to bloom without a gardener. It hardly matters in the end which explanation a person prefers. The light comes when it is needed. That much, at least, has never once failed to be true. Mira had closed the little green book then, and had thought in the unhurried logic the whole cottage seemed determined to teach her that it did not matter in the least whether any of it was, in some strict and provable sense, true. The stories were kind. And Mira found she was entirely willing to be the next small chapter in that same long, unhurried telling. It was only afterward, stepping out into the cool, clean night, that she understood she was not simply going for a walk along an unfamiliar shore. The sand was cool and slightly damp beneath her bare feet. Packed firm near the water's edge where the tide had smoothed it into something like pale glass. Holding for a moment the faint silver reflection of the clearing sky before the next small wave, erased it and began the reflection anew. Mira walked slowly, her shawl drawn close against the mild night air, and found that her feet, left to their own devices, chose to walk exactly where the water met the land, so that with every few steps, a thin, cool sheet of foam slid up over her toes and retreated again. A small, repeating welcome. The moon itself hung low and full over the water, laying down a long, bright road across the waves that seemed to lead nowhere and everywhere at once, shifting and reforming with each swell as though it, too, breathed along with the sea. She had walked perhaps a quarter mile from the cottage, its windows still glowing warm and gold behind her, small and steady as a lighthouse of its own, when she noticed the first of the lights in the water. They were small, no larger than her palm, and they moved with a gentle, deliberate rhythm just beneath the surface, pulsing faintly blue-green, like something dreamed rather than seen. Mira stopped, her breath caught somewhere between wonder and disbelief, and watched as more of them gathered near the shallows, clustering and drifting apart in unhurried patterns, until the shape of what they were became clear. Not lights at all, but creatures. Small, translucent, finned things, no bigger than her hand. Their bodies glowing faintly from within, as though each one carried a tiny lantern beneath its skin. Mira crouched slowly at the water's edge, careful not to move too quickly, and extended one hand not to touch, only to offer. The small, glowing creature drifted closer still, close enough that she could see the faint pattern along its side, like the whorls of a shell. And for a moment, it brushed the tip of one finger with something that felt less like a fish and more like a small, warm exhale. before turning and gliding back out into the deeper dark. She stayed crouched there a long while, watching them, her heart doing something quiet and unfamiliar in her chest. Not the quick beat of fear, but something slower, wider, closer to awe. Further along the shore, where a low outcrop of dark rock broke the smooth line of the sand, she found a scatter of tide pools left behind by a tide now well on its retreat. And here she lingered even longer, drawn down onto her knees in the cool sand to look more closely into each small mirror of water. In one pool, a cluster of orange starfish lay pressed against the rock, their arms curled in patient, unhurried postures. In another, a tiny crab the color of wet sand froze mid-step at her shadow, then, when she remained still, resumed its careful sideways progress. She noticed then the shells. They were scattered among the rocks the way shells always are, pale and ordinary at first glance. But as her eyes adjusted further to the dark, she began to see that several of them glowed faintly from within. The same soft blue-green as the small creatures in the water, as though each had swallowed a fragment of moonlight and had not yet finished digesting it. She lifted one carefully from its resting place in the sand, a spiral shell small enough to fit entirely inside her closed hand, and found that its glow brightened faintly at her touch, warm rather than cold, pulsing very slowly, like something sleeping and, in its sleep, still gently breathing. Some instinct told her to set it back precisely where she'd found it. And she did, watching its glow settle again into the sand, dimming slowly until it matched the pale, ordinary stillness of the shells around it. Rising, she noticed that the glowing shells seemed to form a loose, wandering line along the sand, spaced perhaps 10 or 12 feet apart, curving away from the tide pools and further down the shore, toward a dark shape she had not noticed before, silhouetted against the clearing sky at the edge of a distant headland. A tall, narrow tower, unlit, standing alone above the water, like a sentinel keeping some old, patient watch. she followed the shells. It was not a hurried walk. Nothing about this night seemed to want hurrying. And she found herself content to let each glowing shell reveal itself only when she was near enough to see it. Small pools of gentle blue light appearing out of the dark sand every so often, like stepping stones laid down by someone who had known, somehow, that she would come this way. Overhead, the last clouds finally cleared entirely, and the sky opened into a wide, dense field of stars. More of them than she had seen in years. Arranged in slow, ancient patterns she only half remembered the names of. The whale's call came again, closer this time, or perhaps only louder in the stillness. A long, low note that seemed to hum through the sand beneath her feet before fading back into the larger hush of the sea. The tower grew slowly larger as she walked, its shape sharpening against the star-thick sky. Not the tall, modern kind of lighthouse she had pictured, but something older, shorter, built of the same dark stone as the cottage itself. Its lantern room dark and empty, its narrow windows unlit but somehow not unwelcoming, whereas she stopped a little distance from its base, the last glowing shell resting in the sand just before her feet, and looked up at it a long while, feeling the particular hush that gathers around very old, very patient things. The lighthouse door, when she found it, stood very slightly ajar, as though someone had passed through only a little while before, or perhaps had left it open on purpose, the way a good host leaves the door open for a guest still making their way up the path. Mira pushed it the rest of the way, its old hinges giving a low, contented groan rather than a creak, and stepped into a small round room that smelled of salt and cold stone, and, very faintly, of the same lavender that grew along the cottage path. A narrow iron staircase spiraled upward into the dark. And here, in this particular unhurried version of herself, she felt no hesitation at all. Only the same gentle curiosity that had carried her from the cottage, along the shore past the tide pools, and to this door. she began to climb. The stairs were worn smooth in their centers, and as she climbed, faint light began to reach her from above. Not electric light, but something softer, flickering gold. She emerged after a slow spiral that left her pleasantly breathless into the lantern room at the top, and found there, resting in the center of the small round chamber, an old brass lamp very much like the one that had greeted her at the cottage door. Its flame burning low and steady, casting long, shifting shadows against the curved glass walls. Beyond the glass, the view opened in every direction. The dark sweep of the sea below, silver-veined with moonlight. The pale curve of shore she'd walked. The cottage itself, small and warm, and gold in the distance, its chimney still gently smoking. And further along the coast, other small lights she hadn't noticed before. Mira stood a long while at the glass, simply turning in place, taking in the entire wide, gentle world laid out around her, feeling smaller than she had in a long time and, strangely, more at peace for the feeling. She found, tucked into a small alcove near the old lamp, a low wooden bench. And here she sat, wrapping her shawl more closely around her shoulders, though the night was not cold so much as simply honest about the hour. From this height, the sea's voice reached her differently. Less a sound now than a kind of pulse, felt as much as heard. The whole dark water breathing slow and vast below her, patient as it had always been. Patient as it would always be. She thought, sitting there, of the journal downstairs, of the fisherman's daughter who had come to this coast in a season of grief and had found, slowly, entry by entry, small, bright things to hold on to until the grief itself had softened into something she could carry more easily. Mira thought of her own life, the hurried shape of it, the meetings and emails and the endless, small, urgent things that had, without her quite noticing, worn away at some quieter part of herself she had not tended in a long while. She did not cry, exactly, sitting there in the lighthouse, but she felt something loosen further, some last small knot she hadn't known she was still carrying, and let it go, watching it dissolve into the dark, the way a held breath dissolves into a long, easy exhale. lamp beside her flickered once, gently as though in acknowledgement. And somewhere far below, faint and answering, she heard the whale call again, long and low, and thought that the sea had heard her, in whatever way the sea heard anything, and had answered back in the only voice it had. She stayed a while longer, watching the slow wheel of the stars, until a pleasant, growing heaviness in her limbs told her, gently, that it was time to return. She rose, cast one last look around the small, warm lantern room, and made her way back down the spiral stairs, out through the door that had welcomed her, and back onto the pale sand, where the glowing shells had dimmed now to ordinary stillness, their work of guiding her apparently finished for the night. The walk back felt shorter than the walk out, the way return journeys often do, the cottage's warm windows growing steadily larger and more golden ahead of her, until at last she was climbing the familiar path through the lavender, feeling its fragrance rise once more around her ankles, and pushing open the door into the waiting warmth within. The fire had burned low but not out, and someone or something had added another log while she was away, for it now burned with fresh, cheerful flame, throwing dancing light across the room's low beams. A fresh pot of tea sat steaming on the small table between the armchairs, as though it had been poured only moments before. And Mira, feeling no surprise at this now, only a quiet gratitude, settled back into her chair, drew the blanket over her knees, and poured herself a cup. For a while, she simply sat, letting the fire's warmth soak back into her sea-cooled skin, listening to the small, settling sounds of the house around her. A creak here, a soft tick there. The particular quiet of old wood remembering the shape of the people who had once filled it. She found herself, without quite meaning to, talking softly into the fire. Not to anyone in particular, only into the warm orange stillness of the room. The way one sometimes talks to an old dog curled by the hearth. She She spoke of the small glowing fish that had brushed her fingertip, of the tide pools and their patient starfish, of the lighthouse and the wide, dark sweep of sea seen from its lantern room. She spoke, too, of things further back. A childhood summer at her grandmother's house, not unlike this one. The particular smell of her grandmother's kitchen. The stories told at bedtime about houses that only opened their doors to those who had learned, finally, how to be still. Her eyes grew heavy. The fire had burned down again to low, contented coals. And the rain, she noticed distantly, had begun again outside, soft and unhurried, tapping gently at the glass like a friend checking in before saying goodnight. She did not remember climbing the stairs to bed, only that at some point the armchair had become the four-poster upstairs, the quilts heavy and warm around her, the small window seat in the eave holding faintly the last gray light of the clouded moon. The rain had settled into a steady, gentle rhythm on the roof directly above her. The particular sound of rain on old slate, softer somehow than rain on anything else, as though the stones themselves absorbed some of its noise and gave back only the gentlest part. In the place between waking and sleep, thoughts arrive differently than they do in the fuller light of day. Looser, kinder, less inclined to argue with one another. And Mira felt her mind drift, unhurried, through a series of soft half-memories that were not quite dreams and not quite recollection, but something warmer and slower than either. She was small again, it seemed, sitting on a porch step somewhere in a long ago summer, her grandmother beside her shelling peas into a chipped enamel bowl. The sound of the pods splitting a small green rhythm beneath the louder hum of cicadas in the grass. The memory shifted, softened, became something else. A rainy afternoon in a different house entirely. Curled on a window seat, much like the one just beside her now. That particular weightless contentment of childhood, when an entire afternoon could unfold with nothing required of it at all. Further back, or perhaps not back at all, but simply elsewhere, she found herself again upon the shore. Though this time the small, glowing fish swam not only in the shallows, but seemed to fill the whole dark sweep of the sea. Thousands of them, each one a small, soft point of blue-green light, so that the entire ocean seemed, for a moment, to breathe with the same slow glow as the coals in the cottage fireplace. The dream folded again, gentler now, into simple sensation with no story attached. The particular weight of a warm quilt, the memory of wood smoke, the sound of waves that had, somewhere in the drifting logic of sleep, become indistinguishable from her own slow breathing. In and out. In and out. The whole world reduced to that one patient rhythm. The story closes here the way the best evenings close. Not with an ending exactly, but with a soft settling. A fire banked low. A door left gently ajar for whatever quiet mornings might follow. Somewhere the kettle sings on. Somewhere the tide continues its slow, patient breathing. And somewhere in a small stone cottage by a peaceful sea, the lantern by the door burns on through the last hour before sleep. Warm and steady, waiting as it always has for the next tired traveler ready at last to rest.